And Dan, you know the, I can hand this to you. Did you want it?
Oh, over there.
Thank you guys all so much for coming. My name is Amy. I'm the Public Programs Manager at the Transit Museum. Please join me in welcoming Conchetta Bensavenka, Director of the New York Transit Museum, for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Amy. So I'm just going to start with a little transit dorkiness. We have some news. Every once in a while, we have new people that start working at the Transit Museum, and how knowledgeable they are is very varied. And one of the first things we tell people is, if anything happens and you're on a number train, for example, there's a track fire at 125th Street right now that is impacting the 4-5 line, then you dump out and you go to a letter train, right? One of the benefits of having the 3 different companies form the 2 divisions is that you have an alternate way. So that's my little bit of wisdom. If you typically travel the 4-5, you should be looking for a letter train to get yourself home this evening, because apparently it's very impacted. So there you go. All right. Good evening, everyone, again. Welcome to the launch celebration of Dan McNichol's, Bill Goodrich's, and Patrick Cashin's incredible new book, 2nd Avenue Subway, Building New York City's Most Famous Thing Never Built. Tonight we gather to commemorate not just a remarkable publication, but to examine nearly a century of ambition, challenge, and resilience in the heart of Manhattan. Little trivia note, some folks might not know this, but this Court Street station was at one point contemplated to be the terminus of the 2nd Avenue Subway. Yeah? The 2nd Avenue Subway extension in 2017 marked a pivotal moment in New York City's history, finally expanding rapid transit service on the Upper East Side. This achievement is the result of tireless dedication and innovative thinking, as well as the ability to navigate monumental hurdles over the decades, literally over the decades. I would like to thank the Richard Lounsbury Foundation for their generous grant to fund this program, and now I'll hand it back to Amy. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Just a couple more announcements. You might have noticed that we have a brand new exhibit that just opened a couple weeks ago. We invite you to come back and see it again. We actually added a new day to our schedule, so we're now open Wednesday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. For upcoming programs, I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter or check out our programs calendar on our website. We brought back Transit Trivia, December 12th, for all you rail fans out there. So tonight's panel will follow by a Q&A and then some time at the end to buy books. Again, the books will be on sale until 8 p.m. and then the refreshments will be available until 8:30. The bar is going to close a little earlier at 8:20. Okay, so now I have the pleasure to introduce our speakers. Dan McNichol is a best-selling author whose books have celebrated the nation's greatest infrastructure projects. He's an award-winning journalist and public speaker who has served as the chief spokesman for Boston's Big Dig, California's high-speed rail, and the reconstruction of the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. He has served as a national correspondent for Engineering News Record magazine and is a regular contributor to national public radio programs. He has appeared in numerous major documentaries and has consulted for the President of the United States on transportation infrastructure policy. Bill Goodrich started his career working in various engineering companies on nuclear and fossil fuel power plant design and construction, and also as a consultant structural engineer. In 1993, as resident engineer, he managed aspects of the Central Artery Tunnel Project, aka the Big Dig, in Boston. After 9/11, he relocated to New York to work on recovery projects, including the new Fulton Transit Center. In 2008, he joined MTA Capital Construction as Senior Vice President and Program Executive for Phase 1 of the $4.6 billion 2nd Avenue Subway project, and later served as Executive Vice President and Senior Program Executive for East Side Access, retiring in 2018. Patrick Cashin's interest in photography began in the Navy. In 1983, he turned his interest into a career in photography, working for Newsweek magazine for 16 years. During this time, he also photographed worldwide for the military, first the Naval Reserve and then the Air National Guard. After 35 years of service, Patrick retired from the military and was hired as a photographer for the MTA. He photographed every aspect of the company over the course of 20 years, retiring in 2020. So those were all very abridged versions of these bios. These are three very accomplished individuals, and between these three, they have decades of transit experience that's contributed to this book. So please join me in welcoming the authors.
Thank you so much. And what a confluence of show business and transit life with a fire at 125th Street. What a baptism. If you all let me, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the book before we launch into the program of how the project was constructed. My mother, God bless her, she's still with us. She talked about the magic of the book when I wrote the Big Dig book. And that was 24 years ago, almost to the day that the Big Dig book came out. It was published by Barnes & Noble, and it was about the project in Boston. And she always talked about how unbelievable the current events were, how we were able to travel after this. After the book took life of its own, it became a #1 bestseller in Boston. But it opened up all sorts of opportunities to chronicle big, heavy construction projects, my love, mega projects, and that's what this is. I spent a great deal of time traveling around the country looking for my next book subject when I landed on this, and it came to me through Bill Goodrich, my colleague. Bill is my co-author on the book. Bill is the one who brought me to New York when I was working on the California High-Speed Rail project to get a tour of the project and convinced me that this was a really exciting, worthy story. He had helped me with my Big Dig book with interviews as a resident engineer, so we collaborated. And to have the most senior program executive, the man in charge, where the buck stopped with Bill on the Second Avenue subway project. As the senior program manager, he was it. He was in charge. And to have that kind of knowledge and reputation, Bill commands a lot of respect. He has a very loyal group of friends and people that work with him and have worked with him over decades. It was remarkable to see people knowing that Bill was a part of this book effort to write about the Second Avenue subway would join the effort. And that made all the difference as an author and writer, to be able to talk to people who weren't on guard but actually supporting our effort. And Patrick Cashin, our photographer, Patrick, 20 years at the MTA. Half of those years he spent focused not just on, but on this project. 10 years from groundbreaking inside of the abandoned subway tunnels in the 1970s. The groundbreaking in 2007, Patrick was there. He was there at the ribbon cutting. But what was most remarkable about Patrick's exposure and constant diligence towards his craft, photography, he chronicled everything. 16,000 images, roughly, he believes, right, Patrick, of all the Second Avenue subway. He said, give or take 1,000. But 16,000 images he wouldn't even let us look at until he culled it down to 800. 800 images, and we took, of those 800, probably a few hundred. And almost all of them are unpublished. So it's really exciting to have empirical data, to have original, unpublished, beautiful photographs. And these photographs bring the book to life. This is it a textbook? Is it a coffee table book? I hope so. Is it an art book? Probably that too. It's not definable. And that's what we love about it. We're really excited about what we hope is the reach of this book. Denise Liace. Denise, are you here anywhere? There you are. Will you stand up, Denise? Just a quick bow. Denise is the designer of the book. She's and every single person here, 7 years, 7 people, 6 of us are here tonight. It's a remarkable evening. There were days and months and weeks, and we thought maybe this wouldn't happen. And thinking you can do it is one thing, and then actually being able to hold it up is a whole other feeling. So it's real joyous, real exciting, and thank you all, really, for coming out. But Denise, I think Massimo Vignelli, am I saying his Italian name correct? Beautiful map, 1974 of the subway. I think he's tipping his hat to you tonight, Denise, because the first thing Denise did when she came on board in 2017 and started getting involved was get the book of elements, the design elements for the MTA. I'm like, wow, who is this woman? This is amazing. She knows all the design colors and the looks, and that's in the book. That's in part of the design of the book and the DNA of the book. So we hope that you feel like you're in the subway when you're coursing through it. And Denise was passionate about this project because in her home region, she's from the Basque region, and in Bilbao, the subway really turned everything around in that great city and made it a treasure, a destination. Joe Stanford, Joe, will you stand up, please? Joe's our editor. Joe, and Joe's a strange man. He has two powerful influences in his worlds. He's an engineer. He's a brilliant engineer, MIT trained. He also went to the Northwest School for Journalism, Northwest University School of Journalism, and he brought both those talents together on this project, and he coursed through the manuscript over and over and over again. Thank you. Thank God Joe's on this. And we challenge all of you to look for a mistake, and that's a pretty frightening thing to say to this group, because I know how I know how you look for these little issues, but we really want to hear from you, because we believe we've coursed through this, and we have what is a book that's ready to go. And then I'd just like to end with the last few members of the team. Per Christensen is a dear friend. Per, will you stand up and take a quick bow? The best dressed man in the room here, Dr. Per. Dr. Per Christensen. And Per and I have traveled all around the United States together. He was on some of these quixotic ventures with me, touring on book tours and whatnot. But Per's a forensic copy editor, and he can smell a grammatical error a mile away. So he was the great guy to have on here, and that's why we're so confident we found all the glitches. And then our one missing partner here is Rita Leahy, Dr. Rita Leahy. And unfortunately, she's in California. We met, as I said before, on this high-speed rail project, the high-speed train that's not running between California's San Francisco and LA. Sadly, 10 years, I was on the project at the 10-year mark, and 1% of the track hadn't even been laid yet. So completing a mega project is what I'm learning late in life is really the magic, and that's what Bill Goodrich did. We'll talk more about all that. But thank you for letting me introduce the team. The book is 5 pounds. I carried 6 of them here with me tonight, or actually Joe did. I was going to. Sorry, Joe. The book is 10 inches by 10 inches, same size as the Big Dig book. Barnes & Noble decided that was the ideal size for a book to fit on shelves anywhere they might go. The book is filled. I mean, every inch of it. We even filled the end pages with graphics. Patrick's beautiful photography. We didn't want to waste a page. And the printer, National Bridgeport Bindery, they're out of Agawam in western Massachusetts, where I'm from. They handcraft books. They do print-on-demand books for Oxford, for Cambridge, for John Wiley. They did George Clooney's wedding album, too. And that's what convinced me that they're worthy of this. And I'm just going to be very frank with you all. This book's a very expensive book right now. It's $120 just to print it and ship it. So there's not a lot of profit in this book for anybody at this moment. But that's what tonight's about. Tonight is the launch of this book. We're moving tonight from book project and book writing and publishing into marketing. And we don't even have pens to sign the books. You know, we're not very organized right now. We're just glad the books arrived. They were dropped here at the museum at 10:38 this morning. I didn't lose any sleep over that, did I? But everything came together, and it all came together. All 7 years of going through the wild and writing this book and putting it together. Jesse Ozabel was the man who guided really all of us through. He was our ad hoc publisher. He stepped in and kept the big picture right in front of us the whole time. And Jesse's an esteemed part of the faculty of the Rockefeller University. He wears many hats. He's the reason why we're all here together tonight. And we hope for years we'll be having conversations. that other people will be having conversations, more importantly, and that this book lands up on coffee tables and on conference room tables and on kitchen tables. We want this book to be shared, passed around. We want it to get to the libraries, get it to the universities. Because I know this from working on the Big Dig. I felt like I was doing something wrong by saving file cabinets full of pictures and setting up eventually a collection at the Northeastern University to be the archivist for the Big Dig. Projects, it's churn and burn. They are not thinking about posterity usually. They're not thinking about their legacy. They don't save their documents so well. So that's why this is so remarkable. And because of Bill and because of Patrick Cashin, the MTA gave us a licensing agreement. And that just needs to be said. I'm an outsider to them. They might know my work, but it was the trust that they had in Bill and Patrick that let the MTA license this book to us. And we're forever grateful for the MTA for that. They are the organization that can deliver the whole 2nd Avenue subway. So we're going to get into the program about how that can happen. And I'm going to take you through a trip through the book very quickly at the beginning. Bill's going to pick it up and take you through the construction. And then we're going to finish with Patrick talking a bit about his work on the project here, but also at the MTA. Fair enough? Fair enough. All right. Thank you very much for letting me go on about this. There it is. So my wife asks often, why are you and we spending 7 years writing about 3 subway stations? And I had to get better and better about this as time went on, explaining it. But it's not even 1% of the total 472 stations, these 3 stations. It's 0.06 if you really want to get down to it. I know you guys are specific, so I just want to be really clear about that. And this is, by the way, Pear's map that he gave me, his treasured antique map, Massimo Vignelli. From 1974, it even has coffee stains down there from Pear, traveling around the New York subway with it. It's published in our book. But why? Because as Patrick captured on the day before the trains opened, the stations opened, the 2nd Avenue subway is the tip of the spear of the MTA's effort to expand the system. Why is expansion a bad word amongst transit watchers? I can't figure this out. The expansion of the New York subway system is a must. It should have happened a long time ago. New York City is the only major city in the world that hasn't been expanding their system since World War II. It actually shrunk. They actually took some of it apart. So we're here tonight talking about what's next and how soon can it happen, and we should be thinking even bigger. And this book, we hope, serves as the playbook for phase 2. And this is a picture Patrick took moments before the trains, or the days before the train was going. Patrick's 2 favorite pictures. I don't want to steal his thunder, but they're right. They landed up through a course of arguments and debate and thinking and polling. They landed up on the front and the back covers. This is the shot from the cover that is obscured a bit. No offense, Denise, but we chopped out this whole barrel over here to the right. And this is on the back cover. Patrick's images are stunning. You can tell, maybe because he's 6'7" or thereabouts, he's not afraid to get right in there with the sandhogs. You don't mess with sandhogs, but Patrick was able to approach these craftspeople, and respecting them, he was able to work with them as he captured these images. This is a Denise Liace. See why I think Massimo Vignelli would be looking at this and thinking this is great. This is a Denise Liace original design of a graphic of the boring, the tunneling that was going on. The solid lines are the tunnel boring machines work. The dotted line is the drill and blast the sandhogs did. And the stations are lit, but at the very top is the launch box. And the launch box is where the tunnel boring machine launched from. And this is Patrick again, inside the starter tunnel, looking back at the tunnel boring machine. This is Adi. The name of the Adi is the late Dr. Michael Haradnachanu's granddaughter. He was the president of the MTA Capital Construction, MTA CC at the time. That's what it was called when they were building 2nd Avenue subway. And Patrick began photographing from the very beginning of the work. This is up in the upper East Side, or even lower East Harlem, 97th Street. That Century building is gone. It's now an air ventilation building. Patrick brings us, and we're going to follow Patrick around. These are all Patrick's images. All these pictures are in the book. These are all originals of Patrick's work. A sand hog and a hog shack guarding a tunnel. And then the magic of all this. No lights brought in. Patrick shot all these as he moved through. He was peripatetic. He was walking through the tunnels, walking through the mezzanines, walking through the stations, walking through the work zones up above. Here you see a sandhog down here in the far right-hand corner, also a welder, also an operator to operate the man lift. And these tradespeople, this is the middle class of New York City. This is an expensive city, but these are high-paying jobs. 33,000 jobs, 33,000 direct jobs on the project that contributed to an $18 billion economy that was all about the construction. 10 years, it's a long time, but 10 years, $18 billion, 33,000 jobs, 100,000 ancillary jobs, 133,000 jobs. And that's before the subway starts rolling. These are sandhogs working. They work on the tunnel. When there's rock overhead, it's a sandhog's job. And then when the tunnel is lined in concrete, they turn it over to the other trades. But there were operators from elevators, heavy equipment. There were teamsters. Everything came out. All the muck, all the Manhattan schist, all the rock came out and was put into trucks and hauled out. Surveyors, laborers, carpenters, ironworkers, welders, electricians, technicians. I mean, who gets pictures like this? This is the mad dash to the finishes. We talk about it in the book. This is mason work, track walkers. These were all of some of the 33,000 jobs. But what's most significant, I think, about this project, I can't figure another infrastructure project that delivers more goodness than a subway station. The operation opened up to the public. Dr. Michael Haradachanu, Dr. H is right there in the center. They led community tours. That was a new thing for the MTA, but bringing the community into the tunnel was the magic, I think, that helped the community get behind it. They learned firsthand what all the noise and blasting and confusion was at the surface. And these tours sold out instantly, like rock star quick. Trees. There were 277 trees cut down by the project. I saw the early pictures and I thought, oh my God, if I lived right in that brownstone and I lost a tree, or I lived in a 5-story walk-up and lost a tree, how sad would that be? But the MTA came back after the work and replaced the trees, 277 trees, with 1,200 trees. One tree in front of one building can have a 20% increase in value of the units in that building. Imagine what one subway stop would do to a house, a home. It's known that it's one of the drivers of value, and we don't want to displace people, but it's the value that a subway station brings and the goodness that it brings that creates the value. And I often wonder, do we have a housing crisis or do we have a transportation crisis? Would we have as much problem with housing if we had better transportation and people could live in different spare parts? And this is an award-winning picture Patrick took of the opening of the tunnels to the public, to the neighborhoods first. They got a sneak peek into it. The first Q train leaving out, again, Patrick was right there always with his camera and his hard hat. And the stations opened up, and we went from that $18 billion economy with 133,000 jobs to suddenly 300,000 people using these three stations, 96th Street, 86th Street, and 72nd Street. But it's access not to necessarily just a job or to Coney Island or somewhere nice to go. It's also access to, in this case, public art. These stations are art galleries. It is the largest single permanent display of public art in New York State. These 4 stations total. 96, 86, 72nd, and 63rd Street in Lexington. Those 4 stations were filled with beautiful art. These artists compete. They're world-class artists. They are A-list artists that want to have a whole station for eternity as their own gallery. So you can imagine the competition to get these coveted assignments, these commissions. And each station has its own artist, its own theme. This is at 63rd and Lex, celebrating the elevated highway that once was up along 3rd Avenue and 2nd Avenue. And Patrick again catching this train on the right, that's a Q train being trained and tested, and the train off to the left going off to Queens. But it's this access to jobs and to Coney Island or wherever you might go for vacation or for a swim, for church, for travel, whatever, friends, family. But it's also the connection to the entire system that now 96th Street, 86th, and 72nd Street have. And that portal into the entire system of 469 other stations is at 63rd and Lex. That's the entrance and exit for these Q trains that are acting as 2nd Avenue subway trains under 2nd Avenue. So 2nd Avenue Phase 2. I mean, this is what we are focused on, all of us writing this book. We wanted to chronicle this story of Phase 1, the most successful capital improvement project, I think, that the MTA has ever done. And if you look at their DNA, if you look at the history, you can trace that the MTA's roots were really to build the 2nd Avenue subway. That simply diagram I'm going to show you. I know. So she's coming out of this trap door. A governor before her that broke ground. Anyone remember who he was? Well, Governor Hochul was celebrating, and we're excited that she was celebrating the idea of pushing Phase 2. We think she's going to come through and push through and deliver Phase 2. And we're excited that there's a governor who's going down, willing to go down into the tunnels, into an abandoned subway tunnel from the 1970s, and hold a press conference just to say, we want Phase 2. I mean, that's the kind of leadership you need. And that's what we're waiting to see if it happens. We know that there's been issues in the media. We're following this, but it's all in the book. We chronicled the governor's press conference at the very end of our book in our last chapter, because we want to see 2nd Avenue Phase 2 get going. Here's one of the most beautiful pictures I've ever seen of an elevated. It's underneath. It's 2nd Avenue. It's very hard to find 2nd Avenue pictures. We'd love to hear from you if you find them. This is from the Public Library, 1936. The elevateds were amazing. The first avenues to get island end to end from lower Manhattan all the way up to the Harlem River were 2nd and 3rd Avenues. They were the very first ones. In 1878, 3rd Avenue was up and running. In 1880, 2nd Avenue was up and running. It took 18 months to build. That's it. High-speed rapid transit above ground, but spewing coal into people's kitchens' windows, dropping gearbox oil on pedestrians, loud. It wasn't ideal, but they moved, and they brought the whole population up the island. And that's the most desirous line in all of Manhattan, still is and was 2nd Avenue. We removed the backbone of 2nd Avenue when we tore down the 2nd Avenue L and the 3rd Avenue L. We removed the spinal cord that everything was hanging off of. All the transit kind of really grew out and around these main lines going north and south up and down the island. And when they were not replaced, when the subway was not built, and that's a theme in our book you'll see, that left a horrible vacuum. Every time something happens on 2nd Avenue, like this museum or like the Christie Street connector, it's transformational. I mean, it brings the system together more and more. So 2nd Avenue has to be built down to lower Manhattan. That's what we feel. And I hope you feel that when you're reading the book and the amazing story of just 2nd Avenue Phase 1. So the subway, you saw that diagram from the Regional Plan Association. 1929, this was a done deal. This was going to happen. The Great Depression happened instead. And then you have World War II, you have Korean War and the steel shortages. There was constant stoppage of plans to build 2nd Avenue. But they tore down 2nd Avenue in 1942. This is a picture of 3rd Avenue. They tore that down in 1955, and nothing was replaced as far as mass transit went. And that vacuum, that lack of service, put a huge burden on the Lexington Avenue lines. And forever, 2nd Avenue was going to be the answer to unburden Lexington Avenue. And when you look at the plans, this is Nelson Rockefeller, 103rd Street in Harlem on 2nd Avenue, 1972, October 27th, celebrating the 68th anniversary of the New York City subway system. They used this moment to launch and break ground on 2nd Avenue for real. And if it weren't for the total and utter collapse of New York City's financials, they probably would have succeeded, but that shut the project down. But in this moment, this is the first federally funded transit project. This is Nelson Rockefeller doing a hard fork after deposing Robert Moses. He's the man most responsible for deposing Robert Moses, and doing that hard fork from auto-centric planning to transit. And that's what this document is. It's the grand plan. This is the mastermind. This is the brain behind the throne for Nelson Rockefeller, Dr. William Ronan, also known as, in our book, as the Holy Ronan Empire. He was the first chairman of the MTA. It was his brainchild to create the MTA, and that's what really deposed Robert Moses. Also a PhD. Robert Moses got his degree, his PhD from Columbia. Dr. Ronan from Syracuse. They went at it. This man won, and the victory to the spoils go. This was the grand plan. The grand design, it was nicknamed, and that's the program for action. And I think this is a beautiful 1970s pictorial of the red line being 2nd Avenue, and the yellow line is the connector tunnel, a central part of this master plan that was given to Rockefeller by Ronan and the MTA. So as the first MTA chairman, everything was to hang off 2nd Avenue. Everything was about 2nd Avenue in this master plan. And building it was imperative. They began building all up and down the avenue so they would get to that point of no return. And we'll share some of the historical pieces, but the first thing is that connector tunnel at 63rd Street. That was just going to be subways. Dr. Ronan, after taking over the Long Island Railroad, folded the Long Island Railroad into that tunnel at 63rd Street. There was going to go to the Metropolitan Transportation Center, the MTC, not Grand Central, like it does today. But this was the beginning, and he doubled the size of the tunnels and brought Long Island Railroad, heavy rolling stock commuter trains into that tunnel as well. Here's a diagram from the grand plan. You can see the 63rd Street connector tunnel, and you can see right where the Metropolitan Transportation Center is. I thought this was a beautiful, fascinating rendering of the future that never happened. But this was people movers going to the west side and going to Grand Central. This was high-speed trains going to RFK, or JFK, excuse me, the other one. And I'm Irish from Boston. I should be getting that right. And then you have 3rd Avenue, and you'll note 2nd Avenue. Sorry, can you see? I feel bad. 2nd Avenue is nothing you see. See, this is the public process. This is 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, 2nd Avenue and Lexington Avenue, trains coming in. This would be around 48th Street. And instead, we now have Grand Central Madison, which my co-author, I'll brag, worked on as well. It was the program executive there as well. So I'm going to briefly run you through, and we're going to bring Bill up to talk about the work. But this right here is a bit of history about those tunnels built in the 70s. Nelson Rockefeller wanted this badly, and he had two skills. He was a problem solver. They found him often playing hooky at school. They found him in the sewers. He was fascinated by infrastructure, wanted to be a master builder. I think that was what he really wanted his legacy to be. Dr. Ronan helped them out greatly with that. They started Second Avenue construction down in Chinatown, the Lower East Side. They started it up on Second Avenue, and they actually built a lot of tunnel. Not enough to put a train in, but they had tunnel. This man, Henry Schwartz, was the project manager for Cayuga, and the other half of that joint venture was Crimmins. And Henry Schwartz wanted his ashes spread on Second Avenue. He was that devoted to the work. I talked to his daughter, and she's the one who shared that with me. These are status photographs, beautiful photographs, taken to keep the MTA, or at that time the Transit Authority, up to date on the progress in Harlem of tunnels from, this is section 13, it goes from 110th to 120th Street. Cayuga Crimmins had a $34 million contract to build 10 blocks of subway tunnels that are there today. And this is fascinating because those grates you see, some of these public events are happening in these tunnels. And they ran into bull's liver. Anyone familiar with this? It is the most horrible material you can imagine. They found it at ground zero. It's rock that liquefies, and it's very difficult to manage. That really sunk these teams. This joint venture went bankrupt as a result of the difficulty of building these subway tunnels along Second Avenue. Bill, what do you call this map? The Veal map. It's for the water. It was developed in 1868 as a way to understand the tributaries, the streams, the marshes, the wetlands. To this day, Bill and Henry Schwartz back in the 70s used this map to see where they were going to run into problems. And it was almost exactly right. They ran into it right where the map was telling them they were going to. This is the work in the 1970s. Doesn't look a whole lot different than it does today. Dewatering was the theme and the problem and the challenge. No CAD. This was all done by hand. It's kind of beautiful, isn't it? 1970s hand-drawn diagrams. The other half, Crimmins, was run by a man named Tom Bach. And Tom, right here, I was looking through the images and I'm like, oh my God, Tom, I think I see you. I think I see you in this image. He shared it with his wife, and she said, yeah, that's you, Tom. Back in 1974, I think it was. He's wearing his dad's World War II bomber jacket. He was on the job. He worked for Mr. Crimmins. He went to Columbia, got his master's, stayed on the job, loved the work, wanted to get dirty. He was so excited as a young man, working on this mega project at the time. And it killed him that they weren't able to finish the work, that they eventually bankrupted the company that he worked for. And he had a very personal relationship with Mr. Crimmins at the time before there was a settlement eventually, and they made some money back, but it was too late. They went over to the east side and worked, after burying these tunnels under 2nd Avenue, they're still there today. He went over to the East Side Access Project, which is, at the time, was the 63rd Street Connector Tunnel. This is the first tunnel boring machine in New York City, and I find that fascinating. And Tom worked on that. And Tom said it was like riding a slow-moving whale through Manhattan schist, riding this tunnel boring machine built by the Robbins Company. And what's fascinating is that is the exact same machine, serial numbers match, that was used on 2nd Avenue subway. Rebuilt many times, I'm sure, but ready for show 30 plus years later, 40 years. Here's a shot of one of those tunnels that's underneath 2nd Avenue in Harlem between 110th and 120th. And this will become a station. There'll be a station at 106th, 116th, and 125th. And they're going to be able to incorporate the new system in the old tunnels and preserve some of that hard-fought, hard-won gain. This is in the tunnel at 99th Street. Anyone recognize the woman in the blue dress? Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. Yep. And I think it's just fantastic. She was a super advocate for the project. And she would start her staff meetings with, how are we going to get the 2nd Avenue subway started? So when this happened in 2007, the groundbreaking, she was quoted in the New York Times as saying, the Second Avenue subway is now inevitable. And I thought, I don't know about that, you know? Think back to Nelson Rockefeller. If you could conjure him up, I'm sure he would tell you otherwise. And that's my cue for saying it's an art form to finish a project as much as it is to get one going. They're so complicated, they're so complex. Bringing a project to an end, that was something that I learned about when I wrote the chapter on mad dash to the finishes. And Bill's here to tell you himself how he was able to accomplish that.
See if I can get in here without knocking anything over. Can everybody hear me? I guess you can. Okay. Well, thank you, Dan. I've got 15 minutes now to do 10 years of construction. No, we'll move along. Thank you, Dan, for that introduction. Prior to coming to the MTA in 2008, as Dan mentioned, I was a consultant to the MTA working on the Fulton Center. So that gave me an opportunity as a consultant to learn about all their the policies, procedures, and the requirements for capital construction projects. So that was very beneficial. So in 2008, there was a change in leadership at the MTA again, and the late Dr. Michael Rodniciano took over as the president, and he implemented some organizational change with his tenure. And one of the things he did is he put in place program executives for each of the major expansion projects that he was responsible for. So just to illustrate the value of networking and maintaining your professional network, fortunately, I had met Michael several years before when I first came to New York City in 2001. And we had worked together on some other projects. I was working for Parson Berghoff. He had his own firm called Urbatran, and we had worked together on some projects. So he was familiar with my background and my resume. And needless to say, I was thrilled to get a call from him. I was literally in the lobby of 2 Broadway as a consultant, and my cell phone rings, and it's Michael. And this was shortly after he had taken over. And he said he was interested in talking to me, see if I had any interest in leading the Second Avenue subway project, which I was thrilled to hear about, and the rest is history. So when I took over the program in 2008, we had only one construction contract underway, and that was S3 Tunnel Constructors, which was a joint venture of Skanska, Shea, and Schiavone. And actually tonight in the audience here, I just want to mention we do have Aladdin Gelati, who is the project manager from Skanska here, and it's good to see Aladdin tonight. Thank you for coming. So in 2008, we were facing some real challenges as far as the project budget and schedule. At the time I took over, the approved budget was $4.35 billion, and even more challenging, the completion date was June 2015, okay? So, Michael had us do a total bottoms-up review of the cost and schedule and what it was going to take to basically reset the program. So working with our construction manager, who was WSP, and our design team of AECOM and Arup, we did that review and developed a new contract packaging plan, which is illustrated here. And these are all the successful contractors and joint ventures that were awarded the contracts and built phase 1. And we, as I mentioned, we had to establish a new budget. So the budget that was developed was 4.45 billion and a completion date of December 2016. That was approved by the MTA and FTA in 2009. So as Dan mentioned before, this was the alignment. What I'm going to talk about is starting with the launch box and going down through, the tunnels went down through the 86th Street station, down to 72nd, and turned west, connected to the existing system at 63rd and Lex. So what I'm really going to talk about tonight is, rather than the details of every step of the construction, what is typically done on a major infrastructure project of this size and complexity is you do a risk assessment. And it's a requirement, and you basically go through we went through with the design team and with the construction management team to identify all of the known risks that might occur during the construction on the project. And we associate potential cost and schedule impacts of those risks. And then you develop mitigation plans for part of the overall planning process. Of course, those are what are typically known as the white swans. Those are the known risks that you're working with. What I'm going to talk to you about tonight, and what we talk about in a great deal in the book, is the black swans. And the black swans, of course, are the unanticipated events and risks that occur on a project. And actually, I just want to stop here for a second and point out and remind everyone, all of these images that you're seeing here that we're talking from tonight, all of them are in the book, okay? So these are, it was a treasure trove of images that Patrick and others provided to us for the book. So in 2009, things are well underway here with the excavation. We're looking at the south end of the launch box, and everything seems to be going according to plan. And then the first black swan shows up on the project, and it was at the south end of the launch box at 92nd Street. And just as they were completing the excavation, some of the work crews noticed this strange ooze coming out of the drill holes in the rock at the south end of the job. And this is supposed to be solid rock. There shouldn't be ooze coming out of the drill holes. So we knew we had a problem. So what you're looking at here is the starter tunnels, which are like pilot holes for the tunnel boring machine. We're looking south, so the left-hand side, the east side tunnel, was the tunnel that we had planned to bore first, okay? But we found that the ooze and the soft rock was in that tunnel face and above the tunnel face. And at the time, we didn't know the extent of it. And of course, on the right-hand side is the west tunnel. So this was taken from the floor of the launch box, looking back up at the access hole known as the glory hole. Our work zone was set up on the east side of 2nd Avenue because as you can see, the access hole is directly above the east tunnel, and that was where S3 was planning on lowering the TBM main components and doing the assembly directly below in front of the east tunnel, and that was going to be bored first. And above the west tunnel, we had active lanes of traffic on 2nd Avenue. So we knew we were going to have a delay on the east tunnel. So we worked with S3 and with the team to decide on an option to move the TBM over to the west tunnel and bore that first to buy us some time to deal with the east tunnel. So we did a thorough investigation did additional borings along 2nd Avenue above the East Tunnel. We needed to find out what the extent of this weak rock was, and then we needed to develop options on how do we strengthen that rock. And the option we settled on was ground freezing. And, you know, that was, it was going to take, you know, several months to get the design done for the ground freeze system, get the equipment there, get it set up, and then operate it long enough that, you know, several months had to go by to actually freeze the ground above the tunnel so it was strong enough, safe enough to mine through it. So the plan was, let's bore the west bore first, all the way down, pull the machine back, and by the time that's complete and the machine gets pulled back, our freeze should be complete and be able to move over to the East Tunnel. So this is a photo of the area right behind the TBM machine. This is one of the sand hogs working in that area. Very tough work, but the good news was that the West Tunnel was underway and mining was getting done. This is a close-up shot of the tunnel muck coming off the cutter head, comes back to the back of the machine on a conveyor, gets loaded into a muck car, which is part of a work train. All that material was hauled by work train back to the launch box, and then by conveyor brought up to the surface and loaded into trucks for transportation and disposal off-site. And this is the celebratory photo with the sand hogs, the urban miners, the S3 construction team after they successfully had mined both tunnels. So things were going well there. They do pick up on, oh, you picked it up on. Yeah, we do have, you know, someone who decided to put the flashlight in their mouth for this project. So.
Could be electrician.
Yeah, that was an electrician probably. So right about now, the second black swan shows up on the project. And this was at the 72nd Street station area. And this was one of our worst nightmares realized, and this was the blast that got away from us in August 2012. This was at 72nd Street and 2nd Avenue. It occurred in an escalator wellway that was being blasted. Something went wrong with this blast, and we had you know, this was captured in the Daily News. It was a very public event. Thank God no one was hurt. There were no injuries. There was some property damage. But the biggest damage to the project at the time, in my opinion, was the fact that we lost in one afternoon the trust and confidence of the community in building this project in a safe manner. And of course, the fire department of New York, who issues all of the blasting permits for contractors in the city, stopped all our work. We could not do any more blasting until such time there was an investigation that we conducted, and we had to come up with a revised blasting and inspection protocol. The other thing was the softer side of it. There was the fact that we needed to rebuild the trust with the community. And one of the things we did was a whole series of roundtable workshops with the residents, with the community, with our community relations folks, our contractors and designers. And we wanted to hear from the community what their concerns were with the project, what their complaints were, and collaboratively work with us on developing solutions that we can implement to make the project a better project in the neighborhood. So a couple of the changes that I'll discuss here. One was we had these muck houses, as you probably remember, along 2nd Avenue at 86th Street and 72nd. And it was the 72nd Street contractor that came up with this proposal when they bid and were awarded their contract. They had planned to use these muck houses for loading the tunnel muck and to the trucks and transporting it off-site. As a result of the workshop, one of the other things we did with the muck houses, since they were already there, is we modified them to better control the dust being generated from the blasting and from the operations in the cavern below. And so that was something we did as a result of this incident. In addition, we opened a community information center along 2nd Avenue in a vacant storefront. And this was a drop-in center for people in the neighborhood to come in and ask questions about the project and to learn about the project. The other thing we did with the information center, we decided to do, as Dan alluded to, we decided to do public tours. Now this is something the MTA, to the best of my knowledge, had never done before, where, I mean, the mentality of community relations was you keep the public out of your work zones, and we always tried through community board meetings to convey through pictures and slides and briefings and stuff the complexity of the project. But what really worked was bringing the public. These were Saturday public tours that people signed up for. We brought they would come into the information center. Michael would give them a quick overview on the project and what they were going to see on the tour. And then everyone got a hard hat, a vest, and they came down into the cavern and walked through the tunnels in the cavern, to see the construction firsthand. And it was only then that they really understood the size and complexity of what we were trying to do below the street level, out of sight, on 2nd Avenue. And by the way, this was at 84th Street. This is the escalator wellway that comes down into the south end of the 86th Street station. We nicknamed this the Spanish Steps. There was a lot of steps there. And one of the things we did, thanks to Patrick and some of the other photographers, is we would capture group photos and individual photos of people on the tour. And Michael would personally autograph every picture, and everyone that came on a tour got a autographed color copy of the tour that they were on that day, which I still have mine. The concept of a community information center was adopted for phase 2. It's up and running. This is a picture of the information center up on 125th Street. Of course, they only have one contract that's underway right now. We expected something more than that, but there's a utilities relocation contract. But he shared with us all the plans for phase 2. So very quickly, as Dan mentioned, we're going north from 96th Street. The existing tunnels from the 70s, Section 11 is already incorporated into Phase 1. The tail tracks north of 96th Street Station they'll be converted to running tunnels. There'll be a new station on 106th Street, a new station on 116th, and what's shown in gray is all existing tunnel. So just north of the 116th station is where you're going to start to see TBM mining. And that will extend up to 125th Street, and then it'll go west over to the new station for between 3rd and Park Avenue, and the tail tracks will extend to the west of Park Avenue. We just need a governor that will get that going. And speaking of governors, the third swan that showed up on the project, which was the biggest and baddest swan, was the governor. It was Governor Cuomo. And what was interesting was Governor Cuomo had no interest in the 2nd Avenue subway for years. We never heard from the governor's office on the project, but like all good politicians, when in the fall of 2015, as we were less than 18 months away from completion, I'm sure the governor was briefed and stuff. There's a possible ribbon cutting ceremony. So the governor was very interested in getting involved in the project, and there was a lot of schedule pressure at the time. There was a good possibility that the schedule would have been extended again, but the governor would have nothing to do with that. He said that, this project will be done, and if I have to push trains down the track, it'll open on time. So, and it was known that the governor would make unannounced visits to the project, and he would actually show up and get escorted down into the work zones, the work areas underground, and he's counting heads, wanted to see how many people were working on identified problems that might affect an on-time opening. So the governor was and his administration were very involved. As I mentioned, there was a lot of pressure on the schedule. You can kind of tell from the body language in this picture, how much pressure there was on the trades, the contractors, and this picture was taken 60 days before the project opened. So that gives you an idea of how much there was left to do at the time. And it was all hands on deck. What I will say to the governor's credit is his involvement in the project at this point in time focused and aligned everyone on the project. MTA's leadership, New York City Transit, their operations and maintenance people, the contractors, the consultants, the trades. There wasn't anyone that was going to disappoint the governor. The governor was holding weekly meetings at his offices on 3rd Avenue with the heads of the MTA, the construction companies, and the consultants. And it was there were hands-on meetings talking about issues that might affect the opening. And actually, one of the people that was heavily involved in managing the MTA's interest in one of the stations, we had 4 MTA people who one was assigned to each station, and these were kind of I called them milestone managers. And Tony D'Amico is here tonight. He was actually our CFO. He was our CFO for MTACC, but he got pulled out of his office and sent up to 72nd Street and spent the better part of a year to make sure 72nd Street was going to open on time. So here we are, opening day, front and center, thumbs up. I got it done. The governor and Tom Prendergast, the MTA chairman, coming down the escalator at 96th Street. And can't see it in the picture, but there's a whole gaggle of photographers and the media capturing this photo op for the governor. This is the inaugural train ride with the governor and the chairman and the public, the first train. And this is not 2nd Avenue. It is in our book. As Dan alluded to, Actually, in 2014, I moved over to the East Side Access Project and take over that project, which is now Grand Central Madison. And it was bittersweet in retrospect that I left Second Avenue in 2014, but it was great from the standpoint that Tim got promoted to be the deputy program executive, Tim Gianfrancesco, and my deputy, Anil Parikh, took over the project. So they took over the reins of the project, the team that I led, and they drove it to completion for the opening. So these are before and after pictures. This is on the left, obviously, is the cavern for the station, where we have eight TBM tunnels that come into this cavern. This cavern was, I thought Second Avenue Subway's caverns were big. This one was, cavern on steroids. It was huge. And you can see the trains on the right. This is one of 8 tunnels that go out the north end of the station, and the Long Island Railroad train. That both of these pictures were taken from the same perspective. So now it's my pleasure to introduce the creative genius who captured through images I think the complexity and scale of this project and many more over his 20 years with the MTA, my friend Patrick Cashin.
Well, good evening, and thank you, Bill, for that introduction. I started work at the MTA in 2000, and before that I was at Newsweek magazine for 16 years. In 2006, I got a call from the project manager, Michael Savano, and asked me to come down to photograph the project he was working on, which was South Ferry, because he felt that it was worth documenting, and he cornered me one day and told me to come down. So that started my career as a construction photographer with the MTA. And I immediately felt very comfortable in this environment because it reminded me a lot of working on a flight deck of an aircraft carrier. When I was in the Navy, it was like everything was moving, your head was going back and forth, and you never closed your eyes. So I want to quickly go through a few of the other mega projects that the MTA had me do. This was South Ferry in 2006, South Ferry in 2008, and when it first opened in 2009. But then in 2012, we have Hurricane Sandy, and it completely gutted and flooded South Ferry Station. It had to be totally rebuilt from scratch. All the electric wiring, everything, the tracks, pretty much had to be replaced. And here we have the East Side Access in 2009, 2013, and when it almost opened, in 2023, as the Grand Central Madison. And this is the 7-line extension, which ran along from Times Square, along 11th Avenue to the Hudson Yards. This was 2008, 2013, and somewhere in there is 2015 when it opened. They predict this station to be one of the busiest stations in the system when all the construction is done. There's quite a bit of new high-rises and office buildings going up, which I'm sure anyone living in the city has been in there. So they predict this to be a very, very busy station. Here we have Grand Central, we have the Transit Center at Fulton Street in 2010 when it was just a hole in the ground. And here it is in 2013. This is Cortlandt Street Station a week after 9/11. And this is it in 2018 when it reopened. Okay. Now, all these projects could not have been completed without the hard work of many, many trade unions. In particular, the Sandhogs of Local 147. These guys ran all the tunnel boring machines and they did all the mining. Now, the next two images, there's a quick story behind the next two images. I was photographing this sandhog in the 86th Street Cavern, I believe. And right to my left was a New York Times photographer taking pictures of one of the sandhogs. In fact, what he did was he went over to the sandhog, stopped him from doing what he was doing, told him to come over to this spot so he could pose him and create a shot that he wanted. Now, I pretty much went into shock because it never dawned on me to ask somebody to stop working and to take the, never even thought of it. Well, that lasted about 10 minutes when the foreman came over, started screaming at the worker, and told the photographer never to bother any more of his workers. And this shot, I was walking back from taking some shots of the tunnel boring machine on the west tunnel, and I was following these two sandhogs out of the tunnel, and it just dawned on me at that point when I saw these two guys and the scale of the cavern that they were walking into. It just hit me how big this project was. It just, for some reason, that particular time, it just kind of, I said, wow, this is amazing what these guys are doing. The guy on the left didn't mind me pointing a camera at him. The guy on the right, not so much. I got a lot of those looks from these guys. But you just take the picture and you run away. That's all you can do. And now, if you ever want to see a bunch of politicians clear the room, just fill it full of smoke and get out of their way, because you can see how the sandhogs are just used to this environment. They walk around in it all the time. And this is me after a day of trying to keep up with those guys. And believe it or not, the MTA actually wanted me to photograph other things besides the construction. This is at the 180th Street Yard in the Bronx. I had to photograph the newly arrived 1R42 trains. And I was just lucky enough they had them nicely lined up for me. Next, a few years later, I had to go photograph the new R188 subway cars, and I found this one pulling into the Queensboro station. And I just kind of waited till the sun was going down to get that shot. Now, I got to climb, the MTA has 6 bridges. I had the chance to climb all 6 of them. And this shot was on top of the Brooklyn Tower of the Verrazano Bridge. Now, on 3 of the bridges, the MTA Bridges and Tunnels people built shelters for the peregrine falcons to lay their eggs. And every May, we would go up with Christopher Nastarsky, who is a research scientist for the City of New York, Department of Environmental Protection. He was there to tag all the new chicks. So this is one of the better jobs you have you do all the grip and grins so you'll be able to get on top of the bridges and take these shots. This is taken on top of the Bronx Tower of the Throgs Neck Bridge. This is the west side of Grand Central Terminal. I took it from a 16th story building on Madison Avenue before the One Vanderbilt building was built. You can't get this shot anymore. Now, one late night I got a call from the president of the Long Island Railroad and told me to get myself down to the Madison Yards, the Hudson Yards on 34th Street because there was a derailment. So when I got there, I found this, and I could never get a straight answer from anybody about what happened. This is a shot from inside the Coney Island maintenance facility. This place is really a photographer's paradise. You could spend weeks in there photographing all the workers and all the environment, all the machines and subway cars being repaired. I loved it there. And I always like to mention the people behind the scenes, the administrative assistants, the lawyers, the janitors that help make the MTA run. Everyone sees the bus drivers, the motormen, the conductors, but these people work just as hard to make sure the MTA runs right. And I just always like to mention them. Now, give me a second here. All right. Now that phase one is completed and is a huge success, we must start thinking about starting and completing phase two for the Harlem community. And how do I measure phase one was a success? Well, all you have to do is ride from 96th Street down to 72nd Street on rush hour and you won't find a seat. The trains are packed. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And I believe I'm turning it back over.
Yeah, I think this mic works. Can you guys hear me? I'm going to invite the speakers to come and sit up. I want to leave plenty of time before 8 if you still want to buy a book and for a reception. And you'll have time, you guys can go up and Winston will give you guys your mics. So I'm going to go straight to audience questions and then keep it a little bit short. So again, you can still buy a book before 8 and enjoy the food and the wine and also ask more questions of them. But if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring a mic. Okay, I already see one. Oh.
Hello?
Hi, I have a construction question maybe for Bill Goodrich. I'm over here. So when I first heard that phase one would be deep bore construction, I figured, the street would not be impacted at all. But when I would drive down 2nd Avenue, the entire stretch, not just where the stations were, it was completely impacted. There were lane closures, there were shacks built everywhere, the traffic had a zigzag from the left side to the right side and back and forth. Why was that the case? If you're doing deep construction, why was the street so impacted?
Well, it's a good question. It's a great question. The nature of the project was there were two of the three new stations were mine caverns, okay? But we still had to stage work at the surface because all the equipment, all of the material being delivered to the site for the construction of those two stations, 72nd Street and 86th Street, still had to get delivered at the surface, and it had to come down through the access shafts. There was large access shafts, one at the north end of the station and one at the south end. So all of that material still had to come down 2nd Avenue for delivery. And of course, 96th Street where the lunchbox was in the 96th Street station, that was not deep construction. That was your, if you will, your traditional cut and cover construction. So that was a challenge. Trying to keep traffic moving on 2nd Avenue and minimize the impact to the community, as we talk about in the book, and as we talked about tonight. There was an impact, and we did our best to mitigate that, but clearly everybody knew we were there. There was a lot of construction, and so the deep mine option applied to 2 of the 3 stations.
All right, thank you. Great presentation, great photos. Just wondering, so in many subway stations in Asia, they have the screen doors that prevent suicide. So is there a reason why those screen doors were not installed in the new stations on 2nd Avenue?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, those glass doors that you see in a lot of the stations, you were saying in Asia, prevent people from falling into the tracks, being pushed into the tracks, and she was wondering why the MTA doesn't use those, why they weren't put on the 2nd Avenue project.
Well, platform edge doors, which is what you're referring to, were looked at on 2nd Avenue, but the rest of the system did not have platform edge doors, and the engineering people will tell you with operations that without computer-based train control, it's very difficult to utilize platform edge doors in the system. So as the system is graduating to computerized based train control, CBTC, the option is there to go to platform edge doors. And so on the lines that have CBTC, subject to funding being made available, I think we'll see the introduction of platform edge doors, but that's one of many, many items that's on the list of improvements that need to be funded.
Thank you guys. This was such a great night. I love the 2nd Avenue subway. It's opened up my life in different ways. And I love that you have it.
We can, that's what's important.
I love that you made this beautiful book, and I'm so excited to go home and look at it, and that you explained everything so beautifully. It's very exciting, and the art is amazing. And how great was it to go to each station and look at the art, and it's just wonderful. Thank you.
We have a question.
She was thanking us.
I'd like to introduce you to my cousin. Just kidding.
There's been a lot of media coverage and books written about the cost of building the first phase of the 2nd Avenue subway. Do you see any opportunities to contain some of those costs on phase 2 and other big capital projects in New York?
Could you repeat that again?
It was basically talking about how expensive the project was, and if there's ways to contain that cost in phase 2 or in other projects.
I could ask Tim to answer this question. I won't do that. Cost containment on mega projects is a major area that every public agency, transportation agency is looking at. And unfortunately, 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 1 does have the mantle of being the most expensive subway constructed to date in the world. But there's a few projects underway now that are going to take that over from us. Gateway is an example. But there are things that are part of the Phase 2 plan that were lessons learned from Phase 1 to better contain costs. For instance, we had 10 construction contracts on phase one. The contract interface is between 10 construction contract entities. I think we underestimated what was involved there, and that drove the cost up, particularly as we got into the mad dash to the finishes and the opening, the testing, commissioning, and opening of the project. Phase two is essentially 4 construction contracts. Now, they're much larger contracts, but the smallest of which is underway, the utility relocation contract. Fortunately, that was awarded prior to the congestion pricing discussion that we all went through. But there's 3 major design-build contracts that are the remainder of the plan for phase 2. And design-build is a different method of contract delivery, I should say project delivery, that's being utilized to help contain costs. And design-build is going to be used as the primary vehicle in phase 2, whereas we did not use design-build in phase 1. Everything was what the contractors call rip and read. It was design, bid, build, and that was that's an example of one of the cost containment things for that'll be used on phase 2.
Thank you very much, by the way, for a great presentation and a life-changing project, literally. I live a couple of blocks from the 83rd Street entrance to 86th Street. Fantastic. My question is much more long-term. Do you know the history of why or how the provision for express service was value engineered out of this? I'm thinking of a T-train, 30, 40 years from now, phases 3 and 4, and the fact that we only have there'll only be a local down 2nd Avenue. I'm just wondering, what are the reasons for that and how that came about? Thank you.
I'm not sure I can adequately talk about the decision as far as express versus local. We'll operate, as I understand it, we'll operate with the stations that have been designated, which we do talk about in our book. We show the plans that have been engineered for phases 2, 3, and 4, so you can see what stations. Now, that doesn't mean there may be changes in the future for phase 3 and 4, but I'm not sure. We have a few planners in the room. Maybe they may be familiar on the express versus local question, but I don't know the answer to that one.
So we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. We can do one over here. I just want to remind you that we'll be here until 8:30 if you want to talk to the speakers directly.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. So when you look at the Veely map of 1865, it shows a stream, an inlet that goes across 106th Street. Do you foresee problems with water infiltration at those stations?
I'm glad somebody else is looking at those Veely maps. It's uncanny to me how valuable that map is. It was done so long ago, and engineers and contractors, planners still look at it today, and it's valuable information. In the 70s, they did have problems with water, as Dan alluded to. One of the sections was done with steel sheeting, which is a more positive means of keeping water out of the excavation. The other one was bid with, and I think it was Cayuga Crimmins, with wood lagging, timber lagging, and soldier piles. And they had a lot of problems. But I'm confident that the engineers, the geotech people for phase 2 have looked at that for the 106th Street station.
It needs to be said, the hard part has been done by the Cayuga Crimmins. They built the box, the the tunnel already.
Okay, this is our last question.
Thank you. I was born on the day that the 3rd Avenue elevated closed. My grandfather was the chief designing engineer, I&D, and back in 1937 he was working on the express local blueprints for the 2nd Avenue subway. Unfortunately, can't ask him what the in the 1960s for changing the plans, but that's obviously what limited you in what you can do. I'm fascinated by the work that you have accomplished here, and I myself am a veteran of Port Authority and a little bit of familiarity with these big projects. What really concerns me about the continuation of the 2nd Avenue subway to completion is the standing down of the construction crews between each of these phases, between 1 and 2, and I really hope that plans can be made to have the design specifications, construction drawings ready for phases 3 and 4 before you finish phase 2, and so that you could keep the boring machines going, and relocate them, and save an awful lot of money in the process.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, excellent point. I think everyone that was involved with phase 1 and has been looking at phase 2 and the subsequent phases, especially from the consultant and contractor side, feel the same way. The knowledge gained and the skill, the experience, it seems to get lost. It moves on to other projects, moves offshore into other countries, to other projects. And just as one small example, phase 2 has gone through 2 program executives so far. Tim retired. He did an awful lot of work to shepherd it through the FTA approval process, but then he retired. Another took over as the program executive, and my understanding is when the congestion pricing got pulled, he moved on to another project. So, and that's just one small example. The contractors see the same thing. It's difficult to maintain the momentum on the projects. Other countries, other agencies, I think, do a better job than we have done. Hopefully, we can improve upon that and take advantage of continuing the subsequent phases and not having those interruptions.
And I have to say, we really hope that this conversation, the book, will help convince officials and then the public, really it's the public, to allow the MTA to go forward with 3 and 4 combined maybe and start. And that's when it becomes the T line. That's when it really starts to have juice.
I just want to thank you 3 for such a wonderful presentation. And the book is huge. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's still some time if you'd like to buy a copy tonight. Join me again one more time in giving them a round of applause.
Thank you.